Why doesn't war ever change? In Fallout, we are told and shown in every single game that humanity is stuck in an unending cycle of violence. That while the nuclear apocalypse was the greatest conflict the world has seen, it was not the war to end all wars. Even in the post-apocalypse, violence continues as the strongest tool in humanity's arsenal. Even when it's clear that war and conflict would be poor solutions to a problem, we as a species seem inevitably drawn to it like moths to a flame. But why is this the case? Why are we stuck like this? In my last video that I strongly urge you to watch if you haven't, I argued humanity is stuck in the apocalypse, stuck in the cycle of violence due to its inability to progress out of the 5 stages of grief. That in New Vegas, its biggest factions are stuck in forms of denial, anger, bargaining, and depression, keeping them trapped in worldviews and ideologies that are ultimately self-destructive, and ultimately arguing that the reason no faction, nation, or society has been able to escape the apocalypse is due to no one having reached the final stage: acceptance. But that itself leaves a deeper question unanswered. For if humanity is theoretically able to escape the apocalypse by reaching acceptance, how do we actually do that? Is it even possible? We've never actually seen what that might look like. But we don't need to guess or speculate on the answer, it's actually deliberately shown to us. When New Vegas' main story shows us that every faction is ultimately doomed, its DLCs show us the path to reaching true change, true freedom, true acceptance. In this video, we will be exploring New Vegas' 4 biggest DLCs in chronological release order. They are Dead Money, Honest Hearts, Old World Blues, and finally, Lonesome Road. Each DLC tells us a different story, a different moral. Each one confronts a different flaw in Fallout's human society. And together, they show us how we can finally escape the apocalypse. Dead Money begins our journey by asking us the most important question. What are we afraid to let go of? What are we running from? And what are we letting control our lives? Dead Money is set in the Sierra Madre, an incredibly extravagant casino and resort that never opened. The bombs dropped hours before the casino was set to open, and so it remained preserved and untouched. In the year 2281, the Sierra Madre has passed almost into legend. People speculate on whether it's even a real place. An untouched casino with pre-war gold and riches that could transform the lives of anyone who finds it. A real El Dorado of the desert. And while we travel throughout the Mojave, we pick up on a strange radio broadcast signal that, when tapped into, offers us an opportunity to begin again.
Has your life taken a turn? Do troubles beset you? Has fortune left you behind? If so, the Sierra Madre Casino, in all its glory, is inviting you to begin again.
At first glance, the Sierra Madre seems like a miracle of the old world. Built by pre-war businessman Frederick Sinclair, it was designed to be a place where guests could rest, relax, unwind, and store their fortunes away far from the troubles of society. Luxury suites, exclusive clientele, and technologies that promised complete self-sufficiency turned the Sierra Madre into an oasis. But beneath its glamour, the Sierra Madre was never truly a place about beginnings. It was a place built out of fear. Fear of loss, fear of change, and fear of letting go. Sinclair had known poverty in his past, and it shaped him deeply. He did not simply want comfort, he wanted certainty. He wanted to build something that could never be taken from him again. So the Sierra Madre was designed to withstand a nuclear apocalypse itself. Its doors could seal airtight, its holograms could defend it, and its vending machines could sustain its residents indefinitely. And deep beneath it all, Sinclair constructed something even more telling. An indestructible vault, meant to shelter him, and the one thing he feared losing above all else. His love, Vera Keys. In truth, the Sierra Madre was never just a casino. It was an attempt to freeze time, to seal the world out, to preserve love in a perfectly controlled environment where nothing could change, nothing could decay, and nothing could ever be lost. But ultimately, Sinclair realized too late that his love, Vera Keys, had been conspiring with famous lounge singer Dean Domino in order to steal the treasures of the casino and simultaneously destroy Sinclair emotionally. Heartbroken and full of rage, Sinclair transformed the vault into a death trap meant to ensnare them both. Vera would eventually break down and confess everything to Sinclair out of love and guilt, but it was too late. Sinclair could not undo all the changes he had made. Instead, he made sure to put supplies inside the vault for her and to endlessly play an emergency broadcast in the hope that rescue might someday come. But during his repairs, he succumbed to the effects of leaking toxins out of the casino, subsequently falling to his death, forever separated from his love. He must have died on the day of the apocalypse or not long before, for we know not long after, on October 23rd, 2077, the bombs did drop and the Sierra Madre security systems activated. Any guests trying to flee were massacred by the security holograms, and Vera was locked inside her suite, forever protected by systems that would never allow her to leave.
Sinclair? Sinclair, I'm trapped. Please. Oh god, the security systems won't let me out. They're keeping me here. I'm still being recorded by the holographic system. The doors, they sealed. I can hear the other guests screaming to be let out. To let go. Let go? Let go of what?
Terrified, isolated, and abandoned inside a fortress built in the name of love, Vera ultimately took her own life, overdosing on chems, but not before scrawling her last words on her bedroom wall. The emergency broadcast Sinclair tried to set up for Vera also malfunctioned. Instead of calling for help, it endlessly repeated the Sierra Madre's advertisement, Vera's voice echoing across the wasteland for over 2 centuries. It lured travelers in with promises of wealth and salvation, drawing them into a red toxic cloud that had leaked out and surrounded the villa. And throughout it all, the Sierra Madre endured. It survived perfectly, but nothing inside it ever changed. Its love, its fear, its tragedies, all preserved in place forever. And 200 years later, it calls you. After we follow the broadcast signal, we are led to a bunker where we are subsequently knocked out by gas before we wake up transported to the Sierra Madre. When we awaken, we have been stripped of all belongings and are fitted with an explosive slave collar. It's here we meet 4 other characters, 3 of them collared like us, all under the control of someone terrified to lose it. This man, Elijah, is the one who captured us, who collared us, and is forcing us to follow his plan and cooperate with our other fellow companions. Those companions are Dog, or God, a Nightkin super mutant with a fractured mind, Christine Royce, a Brotherhood scribe and disfigured mute, and Dean Domino, a pre-war lounge singer turned ghoul. Each has been drawn to the Sierra Madre by something they cannot let go of. And like Sinclair before them, each believes they can carry their past inside these walls and that somewhere within the Madre lies their opportunity to resolve it. Elijah, the architect of this heist, embodies this most clearly. Once a brilliant member of the Brotherhood of Steel, Elijah's genius was matched only by his arrogance. Where the Brotherhood sought to preserve technology, Elijah sought to dominate through it. Rather than deal with his stubbornness, the Brotherhood sent him east to establish a new chapter in the Mojave. It's there where Elijah discovered Helios 1, and through it, he sought a superweapon capable of reshaping the world. Yet after a long and costly war, Elijah failed to capture the facility from NCR forces. But rather than accept failure, Elijah abandoned the Brotherhood and spent years searching for something that could restore his authority. Something that could prove his worldview right, his idea that the Brotherhood is doomed and needed to be replaced by something that didn't just value preservation, but instead sought a violent rebirth of society. It's an idea not too dissimilar from other opinions of the Brotherhood. Thoughts that they are too stuck in the past and that their isolationist hoarding provides no future for humanity. But what Elijah does is takes this idea and pushes it to the extreme. He holds no empathy for other wastelanders, no morals aside from the preservation of himself and those who share his philosophy. Who is he really?
Someone who followed the call of the Sierra Madre just as you did. Now that I've found it's more than a story, I intend to take what's inside. Perhaps you think this is a simple robbery, a cheap casino heist. No, this is a heist of the centuries. We're not plundering Sierra Madre, we're plundering history, taking from the old world itself.
The Cloud allows me to wipe the slate clean. Callers ensure cooperation. Holograms, defense. The vending machines provide everything else.
To Elijah, the Madre is not treasure, it's power. The Cloud is a weapon to wipe out his enemies. The collars ensure an obedient slave population, the holograms provide an army, and the vending machines provide infinite resources to grow his new society. With these tools, Elijah believes he can destroy both the NCR and the Legion, and then rebuild civilization entirely under his control. He seeks dominion, control over a world that has been reshaped in his image. But this desire traps him just as completely as the Vault traps Sinclair. He becomes so lost in it, so power-hungry, that he overestimates himself and drives everyone away from him. In the end, Elijah becomes a slave to the very obsession that drove him there. He cannot let go of control, and so control becomes his prison. Dean Domino represents another form of captivity: resentment. In some ways, Dean is not so different from Elijah. Both are driven by ego, both believe themselves superior, but where Elijah desires control, Dean desires recognition. Even before the war, Dean saw himself as cleverer than everyone around him. He believed he deserved recognition, not just admiration. When he met Sinclair, a man optimistic, wealthy, and genuinely kind, he saw someone intolerably naive. Dean's worldview was rooted in cynicism. To him, hope was a lie, optimism was weakness, and the truth of the world was a form of nihilism. Sinclair embodied everything Dean rejected, and so Dean sought to destroy him. Not merely for profit, but to prove that Sinclair's belief in goodness was foolish. What was your problem with Sinclair?
Problem? All high and mighty, lording it over everyone, acting so self-righteous, like nothing could touch him. He was the one with the problem. Never got mad at anything, nothing seemed to shake him. Even after his life kept getting dragged through the dirt. Always kept looking for the bright, shining future in everything. So, I decided to take everything from him.
But what did he do to you?
Do to me? What, weren't you listening? He thought he was better than me.
Sinclair embodied everything Dean hated: optimism, certainty, and a genuine belief that the world could be made better. He wants to prove that his nihilism was always right, that hope always fails, and that trust always leads to betrayal.
This big casino, this big colossal monument, think it was for some woman? No. All ego, all self-righteous and lights, fit him perfect. Had to take him down a few pegs, bring him down to my level. Begin again? Some things you don't get up from. I was going to prove it.
Even after 200 years, he still remains trapped in that need. Trapped in that desire to be respected and admired. To be proven right. He is so egotistical that if at any point the player upstages him in skill or prowess, Dean starts to view us as a threat. We are forced to fight him, and then he ultimately dies clinging to that belief. By killing him, we do nothing but prove his worldview right. But if the courier treats him not as a rival, but as a partner, Dean is forced to confront the possibility that Sinclair may not have been naive, and that the world may not be as cruel as he once believed. For the first time in 200 years, Dean stops trying to prove himself right. He leaves the Sierra Madre behind. Not necessarily redeemed or transformed, but just no longer trapped by the resentment that kept him there. Christine's story is perhaps the most tragic out of all of them. Born in the Brotherhood, we learn that Christine was once in a relationship with Veronica. Yet when Elijah was sent east, he wished Veronica to follow him as his pupil, and subsequently used his power and position to tear the two of them apart, so that Veronica would have no more qualms or connections to keep her from leaving the West Coast behind. Veronica never knew the truth of this, but Christine did, and she never forgot.
He cut me off from someone I cared about a long time ago. He used his status to break us apart, so I had to find a new purpose. Same banner.
Christine joined the Circle, essentially the Brotherhood's internal affairs, and when Elijah abandoned his chapter after Helios 1, she was tasked with hunting him down. She tracked him to the Big Empty, where Elijah noticed her and set a trap. Caught in an explosion, she was taken to an automated medical facility and subjected to experimental neurosurgery that left her permanently damaged, becoming unable to read properly and scarred both physically and psychologically. She survived only because an unknown stranger helped her, and still she continued the hunt. At the Sierra Madre, she was captured again, trapped inside an autodoc that was programmed to alter Christine's voice box so she would sound like Vera Keyes, an act orchestrated by Dean Domino to ensure he had access to Sinclair's vault. But the autodoc malfunctioned. It repeated the surgery again and again on her for days. Even when it ran out of anesthesia, it kept on closing and reopening Christine's throat over and over again. By the time we free her, Christine's memory has become overwritten by the trauma of being trapped inside, and her intense scarring means she cannot speak. She has gone through hell and back to accomplish her mission, carrying numerous scars, both physical and mental. It's the only thing driving her. Her bloodlust and desire for revenge upon Elijah is the only thing still pushing her forward, the only thing still giving her the willpower to survive. And when her voice is finally healed, we then discover that that is the one thing she cannot let go of.
I can't let go. Every time I've thought about it, I've lost him so many times. He needs to die. What happened here with us? He's done so much worse.
The pain and suffering Christine endured was real. Her torture was real and her hatred is justified. But her lust for revenge is still a chain. It's still holding her back and drowning her. And depending on how we treat her during the story, whether we're kind to her or make her relive her trauma, we can finally convince her to let go. To let go of her vendetta, to let someone else finish the fight before it consumes what remains of her. For obsession is another form of greed that Christine almost doesn't realize, but she is proof that escape is possible. She shows us something vital, that healing does not come from forgetting pain, but from choosing not to be defined by it. What Dog and God represent is a different form of imprisonment entirely. It's fragmentation. Once a Nightkin created to serve the Master on the West Coast, Dog lost his purpose when the Master died. The Master had a deep psychic connection to all his mutants, so when he died, Dog fractured. His psychological conditioning to serve manifested itself as hunger, not just for food, but for direction. When Elijah discovered him, he exploited that need. Elijah filled the gap he longed for, the deep entrenched belief that Dog was made to follow, and Elijah subsequently became a new master for Dog to obey. God later emerged as a defense mechanism, a voice of restraint attempting to control Dog's destructive impulses and to free them from the slavery to Elijah. Dog and God want nothing more than to be free of the other, seeing each other as enemies, but they're both wrong. They don't realize they're both parts of the greater whole. When confronted with this conflict, we are given a choice: suppress one identity, or merge them together. If we succeed, we discover what Dog needed to let go of was not hunger or fear, but the very past he thought defined him.
Dog forgot himself, as did the voice that raged within him. After their passing, a new voice spoke within the mutant shell. It was difficult for the voice to remember the two it once was. There was the beast, Dog, consumed by hunger.
Where are you taking Dog? Dog doesn't want to leave. Heard Master. Saw Master in sky.
And the other in reverse. The one consumed by control. If it isn't the clever one. What do you want? Both were driven by need for the other. The courier brought them together somehow, joined the two into one. All that happened at the Sierra Madre was a faint memory to the new personality, like a flickering light in the clouds of the mind.
The being that emerges does not seem to remember much of who we are, or where he is, or even his own past. He lets go of his hunger and his desire for control, and becomes a new balanced identity that can finally just be. Through this, Dog finally becomes whole, and what he shows us is that a part of healing is about letting go of who you were forced to be. Dead Money is more than just a story about treasure, survival, or even greed. It's about letting go. About letting go of the weight we carry long after it stops serving us. Every character in the Sierra Madre arrives believing that they can bring their past with them. That they can bring their ambitions, their grudges, and their certainties. But every one of them is proven wrong. The Sierra Madre doesn't punish people for being evil. It punishes them for refusing to let go. And what does the courier need to let go of? It's the most primal instinct the game planted in us from the beginning. The promise of reward. We need to let go of our greed. For the Vault presents us with the reward the Sierra Madre promised all along. Thousands of caps worth of gold. But we cannot take it with us. The weight of our greed is literally too heavy, and we cannot escape the bunker in time if we wish to take all the gold with us. Yes, I know you can cheese it through exploits, but I'm going to brush past that so we can keep the thematic message intact. So what else is there left to do? But leave it behind, let it go, and move on. Some cling to that desire until it consumes them. Some chase control until they become trapped by it. Some are obsessed with revenge, and some must let go of the belief that they are fundamentally broken. It's in this way that Dead Money quietly mirrors the Wasteland. Humanity didn't survive the apocalypse by learning how to move on. It survived by learning how to endure, But endurance is not the same as progress. Dead Money shows us that before we can try to rebuild the world, something old must be let go of. It does not tell us what humanity must let go of, not yet, only that without doing so, the apocalypse never truly ends.
You've heard of the Sierra Madre Casino.
We all have. The legend, the curses.
Some foolishness about it lying in the middle of a city of dead.
A city of ghosts.
Beneath a blood-red cloud.
A bright, shining monument, reaching out, luring treasure hunters to their doom. An illusion.
A promise that you can change your fortunes. Begin again.
Finding it, though. That's not the hard part. It's letting go.
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 In Fallout, the nuclear apocalypse was the most violent event the world has ever seen. Yet 200 years later, humanity still seems to seek out violence as the answer to all its problems. If Dead Money told us that humanity needs to let go of something, Honest Hearts tells us exactly what that is. The cycle of violence. It asks us that if violence built the apocalypse, can violence undo it? And what happens when we continue to pass the trauma of the past onto the innocent future? Honest Hearts takes place in Zion Canyon, a real national park in Utah. In 2281, it's home to two tribes, the Sorrows and the Dead Horses. They live simply, spiritually, and largely untouched by the ideological conflicts that scar the rest of the wasteland. Unlike the NCR, the Legion, or even the Mojave's scattered settlements, Zion has not built its identity around the ruins of the old world. It has not inherited its politics, its wars, or its obsessions. When exploring the roots of the name Zion, we immediately discover a biblical origin. It can and has been used to refer to a temple or hill in Jerusalem, the city of Jerusalem itself, or later taking on another meaning as a general term to refer to God's people or God's kingdom. Honest Hearts continues this theme, with its characters viewing Zion as a very holy place.
Happy are those who do the work of the Lord. Zion belongs to God and the people of God. It is a natural temple and monument to his glory.
It is, in many ways, what humanity might have become if it rebuilt itself outside of the influence of the old world. It's not just another section of the wasteland, it's a protected place that has not yet inherited the apocalypse. And that is precisely why it's in danger. Among the two tribes are two outsiders. In the Sorrows you have Daniel, a Mormon missionary from New Canaan, a settlement formed out of the ruins of Ogden, north of Salt Lake City. Daniel was originally sent as a missionary to convert the willing among the Sorrows to the Word of God, but when we meet him, his primary concern is the well-being and survival of the Sorrows. On the other side of the coin, leading the Dead Horses as their acting war chief, is Joshua Graham. Joshua is also a New Canaanite like Daniel, but he chose a different path. He was once a legate of Caesar's legion and now has become more widely known as the Burn Man. For after his failure at the First Battle of Hoover Dam, Caesar ordered him to be set on fire and cast into the Grand Canyon. Miraculously, Graham survived, limping out of the Mojave back to his New Canaanite tribe in Utah, though he carries painful burns that he will bear for the rest of his life. What both Daniel and Joshua are united in is the defense of Zion's tribes against the Whitelegs, a raider tribe from the outskirts of Salt Lake City. Prior to the events of Honest Hearts, an emissary was sent from Caesar's legion who offered the Whitelegs an invitation to join them, but only if they successfully killed Joshua Graham and all the New Canaanites that sheltered him. The Whitelegs accepted the legion's offer and massacred New Canaan. The remaining survivors scattered as they fled south into Zion, and the Whitelegs are now pursuing them to finish what they started. The courier arrives in Zion through the Happy Trails Caravan Company, but the group is quickly massacred by the Whitelegs upon entering the valley. When we are introduced to Joshua, to Daniel, and to the rest of the tribes, we quickly learn that the fate of Zion rests on a single question. Should the tribes fight or flee? Daniel believes they should evacuate Zion. He explains that he does not wish to see the Sorrows wiped out, for they are not a warlike culture, they are more religious and spiritual. Daniel does not merely want to save their lives, he wants to preserve their innocence. Because Daniel understands something crucial. Once a culture learns violence as a solution, it never fully forgets it. To him, Zion is sacred not just as a place, but as a possibility, as a world where people can exist without inheriting the violent trauma of the rest of the wasteland. Joshua, however, sees things differently. In his past life as a legate, Joshua once intended to recruit the dead horses into Caesar's legion. In preparation for this, he trained them in warfare, shaping them into soldiers ready for integration. But after surviving his execution, Joshua returned to them a changed man. Instead of delivering them to the legion, he led them away from it, preserving their identity. Yet the lessons of violence remained. The dead horses still followed the lessons of warfare Joshua had taught them, and so Joshua stepped into the role as their war chief, leading them into Zion to defend the Sorrows and help drive out the Whitelegs. But Joshua seeks more than just simple defense. He believes the Sorrows must learn to fight back, and that by rallying the two tribes together, they can destroy the Whitelegs completely. And here lies the crux of Joshua's true internal crisis. Joshua is a devout follower of Mormonism, as are all New Canaanites. Yet since his service in the Legion, he has struggled to reconcile his immense capacity for violence with his deeply merciful faith. He tries to leave his past behind, but he still believes he must pay penance. Not only for the atrocities he committed in Caesar's name, but for the destruction of New Canaan itself. He struggles between two interpretations of faith. One that God demands justice, and that God also demands mercy. And so he turns to scripture to justify his own uncertainty. Nowhere is this more evident than in his reciting of Psalm 137.
By the rivers of Babylon there we sat down, yea, we wept, when we remembered Zion. Remember, O Lord, the children of Edom in the day of Jerusalem, who said, raise it even to the foundation. O daughter of Babylon, who ought to be destroyed, happy shall he be that rewardeth thee as thou hast served us. Happy shall he be that taketh and dasheth thy little ones against the stones. Do you know what it means?
You don't want to leave Zion. You'd rather kill every last one of the Whitelegs.
Given those two choices, yes. In the best of all possible worlds, they would just leave us in peace. But they won't. I don't enjoy killing, but when done righteously, it's just a chore, like any other. Practiced hands make for short work, and the good Lord knows there's much to be done here.
Psalm 137 describes the Israelites mourning the destruction of Jerusalem or Zion by the Babylons. It details how the Edomites and neighboring people encouraged the destruction. But the ending of the passage is especially disturbing. Happy shall he be that taketh and dasheth thy little ones against the stones. That line literally describes the act of dashing children against rocks, killing them, in retaliation for the deaths of the Israelites' own families and their own children. The whole passage is a raw expression of grief and rage, a human cry for vengeance. But this is the key point. In Christian interpretation, this passage is not understood as God commanding revenge, but is understood as a record of human anguish. It reveals how suffering can twist the desire for justice into a longing for retribution. But Joshua reads it differently. He believes that his penance lies in delivering justice in the Lord's name, that through righteous warfare he might redeem the sins of his past, and in doing so, he tries desperately to reconcile his faith with the fire that still burns within him.
Every day we move closer to our judgment. We must do our best to walk in the footsteps of our Lord and teach others how to do the same. For many of us, the road is a difficult one, but the path is always there for us to follow, no matter how many times we may fall.
Meanwhile, the Whitelegs themselves embody another danger. They embody a warning. The Whitelegs seek to join the Legion. It's their ultimate ambition, but they know nothing about basic survival. They only know how to raid, how to pillage, how to salt the earth and destroy. Unlike the Sorrows or Dead Horses, the Whitelegs don't know even the most basic of agriculture. Their entire culture is built upon warfare. But as the Legion itself demonstrates, this type of identity is inherently unsustainable. Violence can conquer and grant power in the short term, but only before it burns itself out and the whole system collapses. The Whitelegs represent a warning to what could happen to the Sorrows if we let them fully embrace violence. The climax of Honest Hearts forces this conflict into a single moment. Whether you choose to help the Sorrows flee, or to help Joshua strike at the heart of the Whitelegs. If you choose to fight, the courier and Joshua confront their leader, Salt Upon Wounds. Joshua stands on the brink of vengeance, his faith being tested in this moment. He has his justification, he has his enemy kneeling before him, and you have to choose whether to allow him to give in to his lust for revenge, or not.
Outman. Kunaman mad. He killed all Whitelegs. You talk. You stop.
Don't listen to this thing. His cries are those of a mad beast caught in a thicket. He gave no mercy to my family, and I will give none to his.
If Joshua kills Salt Upon Wounds, he truly believes he is delivering righteous justice. But in doing so, he proves the opposite. He proves that he has not escaped Caesar's legacy at all, that he has not reconciled his faith, but that he has simply replaced one justification for violence with another. And the consequences ripple outward. The Sorrows witnessing this act learn that mercy has no place in survival. Like the Dead Horses and even the Whitelegs, they transform into a warlike culture, inheriting Joshua's trauma as their future.
Watching as the courier encouraged Joshua Graham to execute Salt Upon Wounds, the Sorrows learned that New Canaan offered no mercy to the wicked. The Sorrows' transformation from a peaceful, timid tribe into a merciless warlike people broke Daniel's heart.
But if Joshua spares him, something much more extraordinary happens. Joshua does not become passive, he does not abandon his strength. Instead, he chooses something far harder. He chooses mercy. Joshua, you've already won. Look around you. There's no need to kill him.
He has a debt to pay for what he's done, and I've come to collect. And so he's chosen to cower in the water like a dumb animal.
If what you believe is true, he'll pay for it later. The Sorrows don't need to see you do this.
I want to take from them what they took from me, from my family. In this life, I want them to suffer. I want all of them to die in fear and pain. I want to have my revenge against him, against Caesar. I want to call it my own, to make my anger God's anger, to justify the things I've done. Sometimes I tell myself that these wildfires never stop burning. But I'm the one who starts them. Not God. Not them. I can always see it in my mind. The warmth and the heat. It will always be a part of me. But not today. Go. Get out of here. Go back. Back to the Great Salt Lake.
In this moment, Joshua finally realizes what he's become. He admits that his mind was clouded by vengeance, that he was still angry at Caesar and the Whitelegs, and that he was bending Holy Scripture to fit his rage. Like how he named his .45 pistol a light shining in darkness, and along its sides are the words from John chapter 1 verse 5, "And the light shineth in the darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not." It's easy to imagine how Joshua might see himself in that verse. A burning flame standing against the wicked, a righteous fire cutting through the black. But the light described in John's Gospel is not a wildfire, it's not even wrath, it's divine truth. It's hope enduring in the face of despair, goodness that cannot be extinguished by cruelty. The darkness doesn't overcome the light not because it's burned out by it, but because it cannot comprehend it. Only when Joshua lowers his weapon does he fully begin to embody that light, not as a flame that consumes, but as a light that endures. In that choice, he finally reconciles himself, choosing not to perpetuate his rage as an example to the sorrows, and in doing so, he breaks the cycle.
The courier's words had stayed Joshua's wrath in his darkest hour, and in sparing salt upon wounds, he was changed. While he continued to advocate militant opposition to the enemies of New Canaan, he sometimes showed quarter to those who crossed his family. Eventually, this new spirit would diminish the myth of the burned man in distant lands. A small price for the peace it brought to Joshua Graham.
The Sorrows still lose their innocence because they had a part in the violence, but what they learn is that violence can be tempered by compassion. They inherit humanity instead of trauma.
Seeing the courier convince Joshua Graham to spare salt upon wounds, the Sorrows learned that retribution could be tempered by mercy. Though he despaired at the Sorrows' loss of innocence, Daniel took some small consolation in the courier's lesson, and prayed it would take root.
Honest Hearts teaches us something essential. Violence, even when justified, permanently alters those who wield it, and those as well who witness it. Joshua is trapped in the cycle of violence because he believes that his sins can be redeemed through repetition, that punishment can erase guilt, that a crime must be answered with another crime. But an eye for an eye and the whole world goes blind. Daniel and Joshua represent two extremes. Daniel believes innocence must be preserved at all costs, even if that means retreat, while Joshua believes redemption must be earned through confrontation, even if that means bloodshed. Both interpret their faith in different ways, and both believe that one must cancel out the other. But this isn't true. In all things, the answer lies in balance, in reconciling the greater whole, in accepting that in life there are times for anger, and there are times as well for peace. To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heaven. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to pluck up that which is planted. And this is why choosing to fight, and then choosing mercy, feels like the truer resolution. Yes, evacuating Zion preserves innocence, but it does so by retreating from the wound rather than healing it. Joshua remains suspended in his rage, and the deeper question of whether faith can temper fury is left completely unanswered. But when you choose to side with Joshua and attack the Whitelegs, and then convince Joshua to show them mercy, we are granted a much more powerful story. Joshua stands on the precipice of giving into his rage, but then he manages to restrain himself. The Sorrows do not become warmongers precisely because they witness strength without cruelty. And for the first time, Joshua does not define himself by his fire. He achieves clarity, the reconciliation of his faith, and inner peace from accepting his past. In this moment, balance is restored as both the Sorrows and Joshua realize that there are both times for anger and there are times for peace. But that true wisdom lies in recognizing your season and when to let go of it. Ultimately, Honest Heart says that humanity cannot escape the apocalypse while continuing to educate the future in the language of the past. Regardless of faith or belief, it teaches us that although violence may protect what remains, it cannot build what comes next. That staying in the mindset of violence by letting yourself burn not only destroys your enemies, but eliminates any possible future for a resolution. And until humanity learns that difference, the apocalypse will never truly end. If Dead Money asked us what we refuse to let go of, and Honest Hearts asked whether violence can ever truly lead us forward, then Old World Blues asks a far more unsettling question. What if humanity survived the apocalypse and learned nothing from it? What if the old world endured in secret, still thinking the same thoughts, still pursuing the same obsessions, still chasing progress without ever stopping to ask what that progress was for? Old World Blues takes us to the Big Empty or Big Mountain, a vast pre-war research crater hidden away from the wasteland. Here, science continued uninterrupted, experiments persisted, and progress marched on. The MT in Big Empty is itself a joke. It once stood for mountain before Dr. Klein accidentally vaporized the mountain above the facility and left behind only a crater. And so Big Mountain became the Big Empty, a name just as fitting for a place that feels both physically and ethically hollow. After being abducted from the wasteland, we arrive in the Big Empty and are introduced to the think tank. 5 genius scientists who were once human, but are now brains in jars with a singular drive to further the cause of science. They are brilliant, absurd, and at times even a bit hilarious.
Are those penises I see wriggling on its feet? Disgusting.
On the surface, they are your stereotypical mad scientists. Existing since pre-war times means these brain bots are easily over 200 years old. And this long stretch of time isolated in this echo chamber of egotistical brainiacs has driven them a bit crazy.
What is this, a high school science fair? Get your act together. You're making us look like a collection of round earthers.
You're always yelling. My receptors can't take it anymore.
And neither can my feelings. I am yelling because you contaminated specimens can't keep your probes off the volume knob on my voice module.
They seem to barely even remember their human lives outside these jars, and do not meaningfully recognize normal humans as their equals. They do not grasp that their experiments have consequences because they have long since lost the ability to feel consequence themselves. Through dialogue, we discover that upon kidnapping us, the scientists scooped out a bunch of our major organs in an attempt to lobotomize us. We, as the courier, are somehow still conscious due to the cybernetics that have now replaced our mind, and launch ourselves on a mission to recover our long-lost brain. As our new cybernetic self, we experience both advantages and disadvantages from our new body, which echo an underlying question. What exactly is a human being, once the mind and body can be separated. The think tank represents one end of this extreme. They are people who have literally cut away the part of themselves that made morality possible, and now continue on as if nothing of value was ever lost. Throughout our exploration of the crater of the Big Empty, we discover the insane and inhumane experiments the think tank did over the years, being responsible for many infamous wasteland creatures such as Night Stalkers, Cazadors, and the spore carriers of Vault 22 that have even escaped far into Zion. Technologies such as the Sierra Madre's holograms, the vending machines, and the cloud were all invented here in the Big Empty. What Frederick Sinclair wanted for the Sierra Madre was the best of the best in terms of cutting-edge technology. But all the think tank wanted were test environments for their inventions. Experiments purposefully designed to harm others for no other justification than they just wanted to see what would happen. No longer asking whether we should, just whether or not they could.
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
It's why the think tank are more tragic characters than just simple comic relief. Because for all their brilliance, they are no longer truly alive in any meaningful sense. They are incapable of growth or reflection or change. They exist in a state of endless continuance, still inventing and conducting science with no strong justification or reason. Most of these scientists are just driven out of ego, and hide behind scientific progress as a justification for their sadism. Dr. O is driven by a desire to prove himself equally intelligent in spite of his colleagues' constant belittling. Boris lingers on his childhood bullying, reshaping the world through cruelty in a futile attempt to reclaim control over the humiliation he never outgrew. Darla, stripped of any real human connection, reduces humanity to an object of obsessive study, fixated on the idea of humans, unable to properly communicate or engage with people beyond the fetishization of them. Dr. 8 is quite literally incapable of being understood, representing the think tank's breakdown of communication and complete isolation from humanity. And at the center of it all, Dr. Klein wears a mask of arrogant authority to hide his profound ignorance, dismissing anything that challenges his self-image as the smartest scientist and leader of the think tank, even as he demonstrates a total lack of understanding of the very science he claims to lead. They are the core reason as to why the Big Empty is unable to move on. Each of them is trapped in a recursive loop of identity, ego, trauma, or obsession, confined within a fragment of their identities, now completely void of humanity, keeps them in a kind of living paralysis, forever moving forward, but without purpose and without any possibility for a resolution. And yet, we are supposedly told there is someone worse than them here in the Big Empty. Early in the DLC, we are told the mastermind behind the chaos of the Big Empty is Dr. Mobius, the think tank's exiled enemy who sends robo-scorpions and other threats to harass the crater.
It is I, Dr. Mobius, transmitting from my dome-shaped dome in the Forbidden Zone, a zone that is, yes, forbidden to you!
The scientists insist that Mobius is a madman, a saboteur, and the source of their suffering. He's framed as the stereotypical supervillain residing in his evil lair in the Forbidden Zone. But when we meet him, our confrontation is not what we expect. Speaking to him, we discover that although he is a bit loopy, he is in fact the most kind and moral member of the scientists inside the Big Empty. Once a firm part of the think tank, Dr. Mobius soon became disillusioned with the other scientists due to their unethical methods, and quickly became worried at what these people would do if allowed unrestricted access to the residents of the wasteland. So Mobius made the terrible choice to trap them. He altered the radar fence around the crater to prevent the scientists from ever leaving. He sabotaged their memories, confusing their perception of time and history, convincing them by force if necessary that nothing existed beyond the boundaries of the Big Empty. However, during this process, Mobius scrambled the minds and personalities of his colleagues, keeping them stuck in a recursive loop where their brains constantly reset, erasing anything new they learned. In erasing parts of their memories and reinforcing the delusion that nothing existed beyond the crater, Mobius reduced them to shadows of their former selves.
Dr. O, which is actually not his real name multiplied, since you can't multiply his real name in the first place. Ouroboros, Klein, they have all forgotten themselves. And not only themselves, but the world, sense of time and history. All that is left is what's here. I reprogrammed their chronometers, geometers, and cartography programs. This is now their world, here, Big Mountain. It was a merciful lobotomy, really, thinking back. They were my friends, but sometimes they would take things too far. And the world isn't ready for that kind of too-far thing-taking. That's my professional opinion, anyway. And I am told I was once quite professional.
Appalled with what he had done to his friends, Dr. Mobius exiled himself. Although in part to embody the illusion of an evil scientist enemy so the think tank would be too scared to leave, his addiction to mentats and psycho over the years have also degraded his mind. Dr. O, Boris, Mobius, all their names are representative of loops. A Mobius strip and Ouroboros. O is literally a circle, 8 being a representative of infinity, and Klein representing a Klein bottle, a surface with no distinct inside or outside, with no edges or boundaries. Essentially a 3-dimensional Mobius strip. Their names are literal representations of the recursive loop they are stuck in. An unending cycle that looks like you're moving towards something, but in reality you're progressing towards nothing. It's not only indicative of how the think tank is trapped in their own minds, but also representative of the entire thinking of Old World Blues. In the Sierra Madre and Zion, we learned the importance of letting go and breaking cycles. Yet in Old World Blues, we see what happens to those who don't learn these lessons. Those who become trapped and so obsessed with the past that they become blinded to the present. Mobius, like the think tank, is tragic because in order to save the world from his sadistic colleagues, he mutilated them and exiled himself into isolation. He chooses the hardest task of becoming the monster in their story so that they cannot become the monsters in everyone else's. He is perhaps the last character in the Big Empty that has managed to retain a piece of his humanity. But even Mobius's solution is failing. The think tank did once firmly believe that there was no life outside their crater, but we learned that the recent incursions of Father Elijah, of Christine, and of another courier with an old world symbol on his back have all caused the think tank to begin to question their beliefs. And your arrival into the Big Empty only served to finally convince the think tank that there is in fact life outside the crater, and that they must escape. So with Mobius defeated, you're finally reunited with your brain, but then are shocked to learn that your own brain doesn't want to come back with you.
Look at it from my perspective. Here I have peace, quiet, and safety. Well, barring the odd rogue scorpion. In your head, I've got poison, radiation, grisly injuries, and biological functions.
It's both a funny and absurd moment, but also a bit unsettling. Because this moment with our brain refusing to reunite with our body echoes the same temptation that consumed the think tank. The desire to transcend the body entirely. To be rid of pain, hunger, fear, mortality, frailty, and suffering. To become pure logical intellect. Your brain views itself as free, but it's living in a fantasy. The brain argues the body is a burden, but it's not. It's the very thing that gives our lives substance and ultimately meaning. Pain teaches empathy, mortality teaches urgency, vulnerability teaches connection. To live inside a body is to be constantly reminded that your actions affect real people in a real world with real consequences. The think tank lost that reminder long ago. In removing their humanity, they removed their ability to care. Their intelligence remained, but their wisdom did not. They continued to invent, to experiment, to push knowledge forward, but without purpose, without restraint, and without understanding why any of it mattered. And your brain stands on that very same threshold. Reuniting with it is a symbolic choice to accept the burdens of being human, to accept suffering, to accept uncertainty and limitation, because those very things are what allow meaning and mortality to exist in the first place. In choosing to take your brain back, you are choosing to remain human. But regardless of what you pick, eventually the courier must return to the think tank and decide what to do with them. You know for a fact that if these scientists get out, they will unleash untold havoc onto the wasteland. So the solution seems to be obvious. No amount of charisma can convince the insane. But does ridding the world of monsters turn us into one as well? What do you do with dangerous people whose minds are completely broken beyond recognition? Do you destroy them? Do you contain them? Can they at all be reasoned with? Can any fragment of humanity still be reached? Mobius certainly didn't think so. His solution to save the world was by breaking the think tank further. And in this moment, we are given the same choice: to perpetuate the cycle of violence, or to try and reconnect them with their humanity. Before this confrontation, we are given the opportunity to help each of the scientists. We can deliver the dog bowl of Boris's pet dog Gabe back to Boris, instilling in him a vestige of love, memory, and loyalty.
I used to leave it outside his doghouse, chock full of chems, before the cybernetic modifications, of course. And no matter how chemmed the food, he would always eat it, and his tail would wag, even while you know, I'm having the most perplexing feeling squiggling through my biogel. I can't quite pin it down.
We can speak to Dr. O and help him rediscover the origins of his true intended name. Not an O, but a 0. We can help Darla destigmatize her fetishization of the human body, helping her come to terms with herself. And if our skills are high enough, we can actually speak with Dr. 8 and help him finally feel seen and heard in the think tank. If we choose to do this, in our final confrontation with Dr. Klein, the other scientists vouch for us. They help us convince Dr. Klein to abandon aggression, to stay at the Big Empty, and to continue conducting science here till their robotic heart's content.
We could have escaped, seen it all for ourselves, tested it, prodded at it, made it squirm.
You can still do that. Here. Quietly. For me.
For you? And for science? I have a strange sensation that I would like that. How odd. Very well, partner. The think tank is at your service as long as you do not destroy us.
Old World Blues does not simply refer to nostalgia, to sadness, or a longing of what was lost. It describes a sickness of fixation on a past that is so obsessive that it blinds you to the present. The think tank are literal representations of the old world. They represent the very people who still embody the thinking that led to its destruction. They didn't build the bombs themselves, but the apocalypse was not born from the bombs alone. It was spawned out of an unethical and immoral mindset. one adopted when humanity stopped pursuing knowledge out of necessity, but out of morbid curiosity. The Big Empty proves that survival alone is meaningless if nothing is learned from it. Old World Blues argues that you cannot escape the apocalypse by living in the past.
There is an expression in the wasteland, Old World Blues.
It refers to those so obsessed with the past they can't see the present, much less the future, for what it is.
They stare into the what was, eyes like pilot lights, guttering and spent, as the realities of their world continue on around them.
Science is a long, steady progression into the future. What may seem a sudden event often isn't felt for years, even centuries to come.
In the times following the Second Battle of Hoover Dam, however, Old World Blues took on a new meaning.
Where once it was viewed as a form of sadness, nostalgia, it became an expression describing the potential for the future.
It can be easy to see science as evil, technology unchecked as the source of all ills, all misfortunes.
With the courier at the helm, science became a beacon for the future. There was Old World Blues, and New World Hope. And hope ruled the day at Big Mountain.
All of our stories thus far have been connected by something, by a single figure mentioned in every journey, watching from the edges, shaping events without a full knowledge of how or why. Now, at last, he calls us back to the Divide, to answer for something we've done. Throughout all our journeys, this chapter has been hinted at by passing characters.
A courier wore an old world flag on his back. He was the one who pulled me out there, told me where Elijah had gone, helped me heal up, listened to my story. He sympathized.
The new voice did not think of the courier again until the battle at the Divide reached his ears. The battle between the two couriers, beneath the torn skies and the old world flag, each bearing a message for the other.
Something bad happened near Death Valley, at a place called the Divide. NCR couldn't cut across anymore, and it slowed down the reinforcements.
What's at the Divide?
I don't know for certain, and I don't think NCR knows either. Whatever happened at the Divide was too much for them to handle. Our Frumentari told us what they saw. Only fools and madmen would march into a place like that. All roads wind down to the same spot, the grave. They said all that's left there is a gaping wound cut into the earth, cursed and damned. No place for God-fearing folk.
Oh yes, the last visitor. Well, the one just before you. Had an interesting name from some language that's almost impossible to speak. What did we speak about? Melancholy fellow. Had questions about history, but our conversation got interrupted. Twice, I believe. Once when the trains got derailed, and then a second time. Oddly enough, now that I'm accessing my databanks, I don't recall what the second time was. Mobius's incessant transmissions keep distracting me.
He spoke to the think tank to climb, showed them the flag of the old world, and it made them remember all of it. All that had happened.
Only one road yet remained, and it was one the courier had to walk alone.
And now we've finally reached it. Lonesome Road is the final chapter in our story. And where our other stories have asked us to learn from the mistakes of others, this one is actually personal. This is our mistake. The one we don't remember, and the one that has been waiting for us all along. Yet through another mysterious broadcast, we are drawn to the very eerie and destructive ruins of the Divide. A desolate and destructive land that seems to be home to nothing but concrete ruins, as if the very earth itself erupted up from beneath. As we venture through the ruins, we get a new robot companion named Eddie, a clone of our original Eddie back in the Mojave. And as we exit the bunker, we finally meet the sender of the broadcast as he speaks through our iBot, the connecting factor that ties all these stories together, Ulysses.
There's your signal. Faint, but there. You came. Good. Curious, maybe.
So you're the one who sent the radio message, Ulysses.
Not my given name. Close enough.
Ulysses acts more like an accuser than a traditional villain. From the moment we enter the Divide, he frames the road ahead as a reckoning. He speaks to us as though he has known us for years, as though we have already chosen our path, already shaped the world, already decided the fate of thousands. And in a sense, he isn't wrong. Ulysses tells us that before the Divide became a graveyard, it was something rare in the wasteland. It was a place that was becoming more than the ruins it was built from. It was a settlement, a thriving community formed out of the old world ruins of Hopeville. Out of it, trade routes were being formed, infrastructure returned, and a new future for humanity was growing here. And at the center of that growth was us, the courier. We learned from Ulysses that in our past, we were the one ferrying supplies back and forth. The one connecting the Divide to the wider world. The one breathing life into it run after run, delivery after delivery. To Ulysses, we acted as a symbol, as proof that something new and hopeful could rise from the ashes, unburdened from the old world. But then, without even knowing it, we helped destroy it. Commissioned by the NCR, we made one last delivery to the Divide. In that last delivery contained a package which had launch data that when it reached its origin point in the Divide, it reawakened the old world military silos. The warheads activated, and missiles fired up and detonated against sealed doors, exploding underground. The earth cracked open, and the following earthquakes and firestorms tore the land apart. And the Divide, that fragile promise of renewal, was buried beneath concrete and irradiated fire. This destruction was especially hard for Ulysses, for we discover through dialogue that Ulysses was born a member of the Twisted Hares tribe, one of the many tribes that were conquered and forcefully integrated into Caesar's legion. Caesar destroyed his home, and Ulysses became one of Caesar's frumentari, his spies. He traveled the wastes under the disguise of a courier, scouting and learning secrets to bring back to Caesar. But Ulysses never felt at home. How could you feel at home in a nation whose whole purpose was to annihilate cultures and integrate them into a war machine, devoid of all meaning except a directive to serve and conquer? Ulysses, traumatized from the death of his family, as well as witnessing the destruction of other tribes by the Legion, made him long for meaning, for a new identity. And amongst his travels, before it was destroyed, he discovered the Divide. Ulysses quickly began to think of the Divide as his new home, as a second chance for society, for humanity, away from the ideological thinking of the NCR and the Legion. A nation taking its first breath, built upon the ruins of the old world, adopting its symbols and iconography, but not being defined by what those symbols once meant. It was a blank slate, a fresh start, exactly what Ulysses needed to feel whole again, to rekindle hope in him again. It's why Ulysses adopts the pre-war American flag. It's a symbol of hope, outside of the shadow of the bear and the bull. But when the Divide was destroyed in atomic fire, Ulysses had to bear the destruction of his home a second time. And he blames us for that destruction. And this is where many players turn away from Lonesome Road. Because Ulysses literally states to us that he knows we couldn't have known, yet he blames us anyway. And to a lot of people that feels unfair, contrived, even cruel. For how can we be responsible for something we didn't intend? How can guilt exist without knowledge? People get confused thinking that Lonesome Road wants us to unquestionably agree with Ulysses' accusations, but this isn't the case. It simply asks us to try and understand Ulysses' worldview, to empathize with him. Ulysses blames us because in his mind we showed no interest or care in the community we were fostering. We simply ferried deliveries back and forth without care, without question, until we ultimately destroyed it. The courier did not look back. We never looked back. And that angers him. It's the opposite of Ulysses' entire worldview. He calls us back to the divide not only to answer for how we unknowingly shaped history there, but how we shape history everywhere we go. How on a whim we can build up or destroy a town, foster or annihilate entire communities. Ulysses brands us a maker of history, a shaper of nations, yet criticizes us for our lack of caring, our insensitivity and ignorance. Wandering around the wasteland helping or killing people on a whim. He is such an interesting character because Ulysses is the only person in Fallout that directly calls us out for our actions. He calls the player out directly for our actions, and demands us to confront our past.
Who are you who do not know your history? It was you walking that road that kept the divide alive. It grew from what you did. Settlers, camps, filling that old world city. Chance for a new nation, new beginning, new way of thinking. You carry death wherever you go. If Mojave doesn't know it yet, it will. What happened here can happen again. You've already proved it. What you did in Ashton, the silo there, the community that was once here, and the package you brought, both had markings of the divide, markings of America, markings like the flag on my back when I followed a Yoda road to the divide those years ago. I saw the symbol I wore all around me. An old world symbol, strong to survive here. Its people strong. Outlast the bear, outlast the bull. Promise of something better. There was hope here. Another chance. A new nation stirring to life. A place I could have set my flag. Not the America of old, but something larger than the tribes of the East. Something larger than the houses of the West. Something better. My history isn't revenge or hate. The road that brought us both here isn't about that. It's about the message you carried. The one in that package, whether you knew it or not. The message that one can kill a nation, can kill a symbol, and all that gather beneath its flag. I don't blame you for the divide. I blame you for what you made me see. Now you will see what you brought to the Mojave, and that will be my message to you. I'll start with the West. Let that burn. Then, if the East falters after, I'll bring the divide there as well. Burn away the flags. Begin again.
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 Begin
Begin again.
Begin again.
Again.
Begin again.
Yet for all his self-aggrandizing, Ulysses himself is a hypocrite. Ulysses views himself as an outside observer of history, but he's not. He's hardly a neutral philosopher commenting on the world from a distance. he is deeply implicated in the destruction he condemns. In chronological order, he was the one who first scouted Hoover Dam and revealed its importance to Caesar. He was the first to reach out to the Whitelegs and give them the Legion's offer. He was the one originally hired to carry the platinum chip to Vegas, and refused to do so once he saw our name. He wanted the Wasteland to kill us out of revenge for the Divide, and he very nearly got it. He was the one who first spoke to Father Elijah at the Big Empty, and pointed him toward the Sierra Madre, setting dead money into motion. He was also the one who healed Christine at the Big Empty, the one who sent her after Elijah and watched that whole tragedy unfold. He confronted the think tank and questioned them, "Who are you that do not know your history?" Causing the think tank to remember their past, to remember the flag on Ulysses' back, and destabilize the whole system Dr. Mobius had put in place. And finally, they were the ones who told Ulysses of the nuclear silos beneath the Divide, the one place left that could make or destroy entire nations, the one place left that still carried the voice of America. Ulysses has left his fingerprints on every disaster we've encountered. That's why he's a hypocrite. For when he looks at the wasteland, he sees himself as a witness of the destruction, not as a cause. The difference between Ulysses and the Courier is that Ulysses' worldview has been corrupted by trauma. He saw the Divide as proof that something better could be built in the wasteland, and when it was destroyed, he lost faith that the world deserved to continue as it was. To him, the NCR and the Legion are failed inheritances of the old world, and he convinces himself that if they are allowed to continue, they will only repeat the same patterns that killed the Divide. So he turns to the irrational conclusion of destruction to cleanse the wasteland, because trauma has blinded his perspective and taught him to confuse erasure with renewal.
There's no future in the bear or bull. The bear is diseased, barely clings to life, and the bull, when the Legion reaches the sea, it will turn on itself and die. Killing one will end both, and you made me see how one could do it. Your ignorance, carelessness, can be used with a purpose.
Ulysses wants history to justify his pain. He wants the destruction of the Divide to mean that the world which replaced it was unworthy from the beginning. It's why he chooses the NCR and the Legion as his targets. To him, they are broken nations that helped create the conditions that destroyed the Divide. And by in turn destroying them, he believes he can wipe the slate clean and force humanity to begin again. It's why he hates the Courier, someone who continuously changes the course of history without reflection or investment. We build and destroy carelessly, without even fully knowing what we are doing or to who. Who are you that do not know your history? It's unclear that the Courier reflects, regrets, or knows any history of the wasteland at all. And if we do, we rarely seem to let it impact our decision making. But that's why Ulysses chose the name Ulysses in the first place. A direct homage to Ulysses S. Grant, a leader who fought to unite two tribes under one flag. But while Grant fought to unite America during the Civil War, our Ulysses does not seek to unite the NCR and the Legion. He just wishes to move past them. He sees what many people see, that the NCR and the Legion are doomed ideologies repeating the mistakes of the past. But he saw the settlement in the Divide as the future out of those two flags, the rebirth of society that we ended prematurely. It's why Ulysses speaks in symbols: the bear, the bull, flags, roads, and nations. He clings to identity because identity gives pain structure. It turns chaos into narrative. It turns tragedy into purpose. For without identity, there is no meaning. And without meaning, there is no explanation for suffering. And if suffering has no meaning, then everything that happened to Ulysses were just random accidents in a chaotic universe. Some people can make peace with that, for the absence of a grand meaning does not deprive you of the opportunity to define your own. Yet for Ulysses, a man who has endured the destruction of his home and family twice over and has developed deep psychological scars, telling him that his suffering doesn't mean anything isn't exactly comforting. It needs to mean something, for if it doesn't, then his entire life means nothing. The Divide was proof that history could break its cycle, that trauma could heal. When it died, Ulysses lost faith in the future. He lost faith in humanity. And so he tried to rebuild meaning the only way he knew how, through blame. And this is why the endings of Lonesome Road matter so much. When we confront Ulysses, he is activating the remaining nukes underneath the Divide. He seeks to destroy both the NCR and the Legion, convinced they are doomed attempts to rebuild humanity, following old world ideologies that only repeat the mistakes of the past. He wishes to destroy them both, to wipe the slate clean, and hopes that through this destruction, he will force a new, better future to emerge. His plan is insane. It is clear he is blinded by grief and trauma, and we need to put a stop to this. And as always, throughout every decision we've come across in the Wasteland, violence is our most accessible and most effective tool. We could easily kill Ulysses, this person who has called us here, who has accused us and taunted us across this whole journey. We could very easily reject everything he says about us. We could very swiftly kill him and walk away from this whole place. But if we do so, I would argue that isn't a victory. I would argue that we're actually validating his worldview. Because in killing Ulysses, we accept that the only answer to loss is retribution. If we launch the remaining missiles at the NCR, the Legion, or both, we turn grief into repetition. We accept that humanity cannot learn from the mistakes it makes, and that the only answer for us is destruction. We just become another force reshaping the world through violence, repeating the cycle of trauma, convinced that destruction can somehow cleanse what came before. But do you see how this choice mirrors back to the lessons we learned before? How dead money urged us to begin again, how honest hearts urged us not to repeat generational trauma and violence, and how old world blues urged us to keep our humanity. Choosing to nuke the wasteland isn't letting go, it's repeating the patterns. These endings represent surrender, a bitter conclusion. But it's not our only option. Instead, the other option that is always available to us is dialogue. We can challenge the foundation of Ulysses' beliefs. We can expose him as a hypocrite. Through the journeys we've walked and Ulysses' very own tapes we've collected, we can show him that he is about to commit the very same injustice that previously broke him. Your tapes prove you've walked the Mojave, yet learned the wrong lessons.
Comes down to perspective, how far one's walked and what they've left behind. If you challenge this moment, let's hear your perspective. If my words are all you have, let's hear them.
Who are you who do not know your history?
That question. Either you walked the big empty, you found the last of the hollow tapes. The words are mine. Whatever answer you think they hold, you're wrong. It was a question, nothing more.
The question reminded the ones you spoke to of their purpose, why they cared.
I spoke those words in anger. I did not expect an answer. All was lost. I thought it was the end. Past their graves of failed technology, they had cared about the flag they had followed and the people beneath it, even with them dead and gone. But there's no answer in that. I do this because I care, because I believe it must be done.
If you believe the destruction of the Divide was just, then I cannot stop you.
Just? There was no justice in it. It was an act of carelessness, a coward killing an idea before it had a chance. I see your meaning. You're tying this to our history. But it is different. The symbol I destroy, it has already proven itself wrong.
In this moment, Ulysses is recoiling as his argument begins to fold in on itself. This is the moment we reveal to Ulysses that he is about to commit the exact same careless, cowardly act that he condemns. But more than that, we present him with a defense. Not that the NCR or the Legion are actually perfect and that he is wrong about them, no. What we defend is the possibility of change. That nations can change, that societies can break the violent trauma they've inherited. That symbols and people alike all have the capacity for change. It's not even the first time we've learnt this idea. Back in the Big Empty, Old World Blues begins as a sickness, a fixation on the past so consuming that it blinds you to the present. But by the ending, it is given another meaning as well. The potential for a different future, one where the past is not worshipped or repeated, but learned from. It is our first and direct example of how a symbol was broken and destructive, but it was allowed to change. We helped it change. And so we argue that to Ulysses. We argue that by nuking the wasteland and destroying these nations, he is depriving them of that very same opportunity to change. Any symbol deserves a chance to defend itself. By words or acts, not this.
As you defend it now, nothing can prevent what comes. The missiles will launch. These questions, your words or mine, what do they matter to you?
I believe destroying the symbol is never the answer. Changing it, that's something else.
It may be that as much destruction has been written in the earth here. One buried this place, yet it lived on between us. One may build it again, build others. Your history has proven this here.
Finally convinced that humanity isn't irredeemable, that symbols, as swiftly as they are destroyed, can also be rebuilt, Ulysses lets go of his certainty. He lets go of his worldview, and we join together to fight our way out of the missile silo. Yet in order to shut it down, we're forced to sacrifice our companion Eddie. It's a sad but also extremely poetic moment. We're not only breaking the cycle of violence by refusing to let the nukes launch, Eddie is also proving himself capable of change. He was built to carry a message from the Enclave and was cloned here in the Divide to help sustain old world machines. But his sacrifice proves he is more than all of that. More than what he was designed or ordered to do. Eddie also has the right to change, and the right to self-determination. He proves that even a machine designed in a cold military facility is also capable of humanity. And his sacrifice not only saves our lives, but the lives of the entire wasteland that was threatened with nuclear apocalypse. When we finally do escape, the Divide is left still as a scar on the face of the earth. And Ulysses leaves us with a line that encapsulates everything.
It said, war never changes. Men do, through the roads they walk.
That is the answer we have been building towards throughout all of our stories. That the only way the apocalypse can truly end is when we as a people choose to stop repeating it. That doesn't mean we're forgetting our trauma or forgiving those who have committed crimes against us. It just means we're refusing to perpetuate the cycle of violence. We're taking the high road, choosing to be better people in the hope for a better tomorrow. That's what Lonesome Road says. That we escape the apocalypse by refusing to let it decide who we are and who we can become. Since the dawn of recorded history, Stories have been used as a tool to make sense of the world, to articulate a problem or a lesson in a way that allows us to empathize with it in a deeper way than just logically articulating the problem. In the past, we've shaped these stories into myths, into legends, tales, and folklore. But in the modern day, we are granted a new medium that allows us to immerse ourselves and empathize with a story in a way never before possible, through video games. We wrap these games up with insane graphics and addictive combat, so it's easier to enjoy the game rather than just throwing a whole bunch of exposition at you. But at the core of these stories, there is always a central theme, a central message that has been the core reason for everything we've seen. For Fallout, that message has always been clear. War never changes. And on the surface you can take that at face value, as that's what all the Fallout games have seemed to reiterate since the beginning. A nihilistic message about how humanity is doomed to be trapped in this cycle. That despite how much we evolve, how much we advance as a society or technologically, that human nature is always fundamentally driven by greed, driven by a desire for conflict and for destruction. I explored this in my first video about Fallout New Vegas, arguing that humanity's cycle of unending violence was represented in New Vegas's main factions, represented as the 5 stages of grief, and that by none of the factions, none of the societies having reached the final stage of acceptance means that they are inevitably trapped in this cycle, unable to properly grieve and accept the loss of the old world, and continuously falling back into the same destructive patterns. But that's only one half of Fallout's message. It's not giving the series its due justice. This video was about exploring the other half of the message. Because while yes, Fallout does say humanity is stuck in this cycle, it doesn't say we are doomed to never change. At least, New Vegas doesn't. In its main quest, it shows that no matter which faction wins the Battle of Hoover Dam, the Mojave is still plagued with conflict, instability, and uncertainty. And yes, I still put an independent Vegas with the Yes Man under that category. Because in that ending, we are shown nothing that argues against the Courier becoming another Robert House. Nothing stops us from becoming another autocrat, imposing control and repeating the same patterns of violent oppression. That ending is left purposely vague to account for user playstyle. Whether you've achieved a good karma or bad karma ending, your Courier would probably shape the Mojave in a radically different way, but with a high potential for us becoming no better than the very factions we just fought against. And that's precisely because each faction is trying to rebuild humanity using the tools of the old world, with corrupt democracies, dictatorial empires, and authoritarian technocracies. And New Vegas does this fantastic job of using its main quest to show you the cycle of destruction humanity is trapped in, but then uses its DLCs to spell out the cause of it. And not only that, because now that we know the root cause of the issue, we can finally take steps to resolve it. Dead Money showed us the first step. It taught us to let go, that we cannot move forward whilst clinging to what we've lost, that greed, revenge, and obsession imprison us within the past. Honest Heart showed us the second step. It taught us to break the cycle of trauma. It showed us what happens when we repeat the past, and what happens when we try to redeem the future through violence. It showed us how violence repeats history, and how it passes our trauma forward from one generation to the next. Old World Blue showed us the third step. It told us not to live in the past, to progress forward as a society, yes, but never by abandoning what makes us human. By not abandoning our morals, our ethics, our empathy, our memory, or our history. And our final step was Lonesome Road. It told us that we must confront our past traumas if we ever want to move forward. Ulysses was the embodiment of this, a broken, traumatized man who couldn't let go of his past. He couldn't let go of the idea that the Divide, Ulysses' new home and a symbol of redemption, was destroyed by accident. He projected his self-loathing and trauma onto us. He literally embodied all of the flaws the last 3 stories presented us. And we helped him let go. We confronted Ulysses by directly showing him his hypocrisy and how he is perpetuating his trauma onto the wasteland. How he is becoming the very thing he hates, and that by destroying a nation, he is ridding them of that opportunity to change. Because changing our nations, our societies, ourselves, is exactly how we escape the apocalypse. Taken together, these 4 stories literally show us a road forward. They show us the true message that Fallout teaches us. War never changes while we continue to repeat its patterns. War changes when we choose to change. Escaping the apocalypse requires accepting the apocalypse fully, honestly, and without illusion. This is what no faction in the Mojave has been able to do, and is exactly what the Courier is capable of doing. Because we walk in a wasteland that has been defined by its past, and we refuse to let it influence us. We choose to continue to walk forward. If humanity wants to escape the apocalypse, it needs to follow these steps. Humanity must accept that the old world is gone. Humanity needs to refuse to repeat the traumatic cycles of division, of senseless violence and war that led up to the nuclear apocalypse. It must learn from our old world mistakes, the mistakes of scientists who in the pursuit of technology and progress completely lost their humanity. If humanity wants to escape the apocalypse, it must recognize that they are not separate from those who started the apocalypse 200 years ago. They inherited the world from them, and the only way out of the mess it's in is to accept what caused it. To accept that each and every one of us has the potential to repeat the mistakes of the past, but within all of us also lies the ability to move beyond it. To define ourselves not by our regrets or our mistakes, but by our continuing commitment to moving forward. If after these journeys, the Courier fights at Hoover Dam and achieves an independent Vegas, we can only hope that they take these lessons to heart. That they can choose to rebuild a nation outside the influence of old world philosophies. Rebuilding Vegas outside of House's influence, rebuilding a broken symbol into something entirely new. Only then, I think, would the Courier perhaps achieve a society reminiscent of acceptance. War never changes. That has always been true. But Lonesome Road reminds us of the rest of the sentence.
Men do, through the roads they walk, and this road has reached its end.
Humanity escapes the apocalypse not when the bombs stop falling, but when someone finally accepts that the old world is gone and chooses to build something new. The road forward may be lonely, but it's ours to walk. And this road has reached its end. Thank you for watching.